there's ever a moment when you realize that even your own flesh and blood can throw you into the abyss just to protect their own spotlight. For me, that moment was when I quietly stepped out of the lavish wedding hall in Savannah, Georgia. Behind me, the sound of ambulance sirens tore through the glamorous air while every horrified gaze was fixed on my perfect older sister, Serena Whitaker, who had just collapsed under the shimmering lights after raising the glass of wine that was supposed to be mine. I didn't tremble and I didn't cry. In my head, one thought echoed. If one day your own family tries to hurt you out of fear of being overshadowed, remember justice always has its way of coming back around. Have you ever put your complete trust in family only to be betrayed by them? Share your story in the comments. Maybe your story will save someone else. My name is Ava Whitaker. I'm 28, born and raised in a family that outsiders always admired, but for those of us on the inside, all we wanted was to escape as soon as possible. The Whitaker family was a symbol of Southern achievement. My father, Harold Whitaker, was a 3-term local senator. His speeches bold and his words sharp as any Supreme Court judge. My mother, Colleen, was the kind of woman everyone wanted to sit with at any party. She could command every glance, effortlessly mentioning powerful connections with just a sly smile. But in our big, beautiful house, always filled with laughter and fresh flowers every Sunday morning, I never truly felt like I belonged. I was the youngest, once the pride of my parents for my art achievements and state-winning photographs. But then my sister Serena started to conquer every standard my parents set. Brilliant, calm, flawless, and she soon launched a standout fintech startup. Every success of mine, awards, exhibitions, still playing with photography. Ava, when will you have a wedding like your sister? Words I heard so often they sometimes felt like I was living in an endless loop where I was always the low note, drowned out by applause for Serena. But maybe the thing that hurt most wasn't feeling invisible, but those times my sister pushed me into the shadows simply because she couldn't stand the thought of anyone else getting attention, even for a fleeting moment. Serena and I used to be close when we were young, playing together on the front lawn, drawing Chuck pictures on the porch every summer. But everything changed when Serena started taking away everything I loved. First my art awards, then the study abroad scholarship she secretly withdrew my name from, afraid our parents might compare us. Serena was always perfect in the adults' eyes, but to me she was the one who would never let me shine even for a second. Learned to shrink into myself, to become the background wall in the perfect family drama my parents staged for friends and Savannah's elite. At every party I was just the girl carrying trays of food around, occasionally smiling to avoid awkward questions about marriage, career, or even why I still lived alone in a shabby apartment in the artsy part of town. Every attempt to be recognized was shut down by my mother's effortless remarks, and my father would only advise me not to disturb the family harmony. Serena knew exactly where I was vulnerable and always took advantage of it. Every time I tried and found a little success, she would think up some cruel joke. Sometimes sending fake emails that cost me contracts. Sometimes smearing me in our shared friend group or spreading rumors that I was riding the family's coattails. Those wounds festered, silently accumulating into a deep anger I thought would haunt me for life. But I also understood beneath all the glyphs, my family was no different from the most dysfunctional ones. Everyone terrified of being left behind, terrified of being forgotten, willing to do anything to secure their place in that power play, even if it meant destroying their own flesh and blood. Suppose everything would have kept going the way it always did if not for Serena's so-called wedding of the century. For the first time in my life I was forced to appear not just as a shadow but as the official maid of honor at a family event the entire city of Savannah was buzzing about. Everyone was eager to talk about the white bouquets, the extravagant dress, the groom, Jack Ramsey, the only son of a famed New York real estate billionaire and the very same man who unbelievably was the first person ever to make my heart flutter. And that truth I knew was the match that would ignite every hidden conflict in my family. Yet at that time I couldn't imagine things would escalate to such a dangerous extent. As my mother's sarcasm and Serena's control tightened around me, I realized I had only two choices: either remain the background for someone else's success or step into the light on my own terms. I started pouring all my savings and time into opening a small studio. A place where I could take the kind of artistic photos I truly loved. It was the only space where I could breathe freely. A place where the youth of Savannah came to tell their stories through images. Even if to most of my family it was just another childish artsy phase bound to fail sooner or later. But I didn't give up. Every photo I took, every tiny exhibition in an old cafe in the historic district received unexpected support from strangers. The highlight was when I won a regional photography award. A small feat in the eyes of the elite, but the whole world to me. The day I brought that certificate home, my mother just glanced at it and said, "Have you ever thought about marrying someone like your sister did? Or do you plan to just drift around with your camera forever?" I managed a faint smile, already used to being belittled. But deep down I couldn't stop wishing that someday I would prove my worth. Even if only to myself. When Serena started planning the wedding of the century, I thought I could avoid all the drama by simply focusing on my work and my own life. I was wrong. Right from the moment she sent me the invitation to be her maid of honor, Serena made sure to emphasize, "Remember, Ava, just make sure you don't draw any attention to yourself." Every word stung, reminding me I was only meant to be a perfect prop alongside her glow. But this time I wasn't going alone. I brought Miles Kim, my new boyfriend whom I'd met at an art exhibition in Atlanta. He was the only one who truly saw Miles quickly became my family's new obsession. They didn't like him because he wasn't one of them. Not rich, not powerful, and worst of all, he supported me living the life but my father warned me, "Don't bring trouble home." My mother ignored Miles at every conversation, and Serena, sweet to the point of fake, went so far as to invite his ex-girlfriend to the wedding. I tried to be patient, telling myself everything would be fine if I just held my ground. But the storm hit just when I landed my first big commercial contract for the studio. The real estate firm wanted me to shoot their new staff portraits. I shared the news with Miles and with my parents and sister, only to wake up the next morning to an email from the client. I was stunned, and only one person came to mind. Who could have done this? Later, during a drunken night, Serena herself whispered into my ear as she walked past, "You'll never escape my shadow. You're just a pale imitation, and if I want to, the whole world will believe it." The hostility became more and more obvious as the wedding approached, with little arguments flaring into a simmering storm. My mother grew even more controlling, probing about Miles, scrutinizing my every move. My father, the one I used to think could be my anchor, chose to stay silent, keeping out of all the conflict. Meanwhile, Jack, sometimes the look in his eyes held something deep and sad I could never quite understand. But I realized that beneath his perfect exterior he too was caught up in this family whirlwind just like me. The night before the wedding, as the whole family gathered to review every last detail, I accidentally caught Serena quietly crying in the dressing room. I wasn't sure if those were tears of fear, jealousy, or just sheer exhaustion from carrying the perfect big sister crown for so long. At the moment she saw me, she wiped away her tears, fixed her dress, and shot me a cold smile. "Don't think Jack cares about it. He chose me. You do well to remember your place." It was in that moment that I realized everything my sister did. The manipulation, the sabotage, even the cruelty, all stemmed from a single fear. The fear of being forgotten, of being outshined, of having her last bit of spotlight taken by her own flesh and blood. But I also understood that when that fear grows strong enough, it can push a person to the very edge of selfishness and cruelty, even against family. And I never could have imagined that tomorrow things would truly spiral out of control, that a single glass of champagne would change the fate of the Whitaker family forever. On Serena's wedding day, Savannah's air was humid, but the atmosphere inside the mansion where the reception was held felt suffocating. Long tables covered in white lace, sparkling crystal glasses, chandeliers casting their glow over hundreds of faces, accustomed only to smiling for society magazines. I wore the ivory bridesmaid's dress Serena had chosen herself, standing in the middle of the crowd, wishing I could disappear. My mother was busy directing the servers, my father seizing every minute to shake hands with new partners, while I, ever since I stepped inside, felt the sting of scrutinizing looks, the whispers behind my back. "Is that Ava? The weird artist's little sister?" But compared to what was about to happen, All those looks were just a breeze before the storm. The fateful moment came when all the guests were pleasantly tipsy. Live music drifting by the lake. Serena called me to the head table. Jack sat beside her, looking a bit weary, or perhaps more accurately drained. His eyes sometimes drifting toward me as if he wanted to say something, but never quite found the courage. Serena leaned against his shoulder, radiant as the queen of the party, but I could see in her eyes a strange tension, a restless anxiety. Serena handed me a glass of champagne, her smile sugary sweet, whispering softly in my ear. "I want you to really stand out tonight, Ava. This for me." Before I could respond, she was already urging me to take a sip. The champagne shimmered gold under the lights, but I noticed her eyes were fixed on my hand, watching, waiting. Grown used to Serena's petty pranks, but I had never seen her this tense. Never sensed such danger lurking in her every move. My instincts screamed at me to be careful. I held the glass, smiled brightly, and turned as if to take a selfie with Jack and Serena. In that moment, everyone was laughing and chatting, no one noticing how swiftly I swapped 2 glasses, handing Jack the glass Serena had given me while I took his. Jack looked a bit surprised, but still raised his glass with me. And so did Serena, her lips curving into a satisfied smile I knew was entirely fake. Just a few minutes later, as we all toasted together, I noticed Jack suddenly staggering. He winced, his hand trembling, lips pressed tight as if he was fighting off a violent wave inside. Serena's face changed color and she quickly set her glass down, but it was already too late. Someone called for an ambulance. My mother rushed to shield Serena from the press's gaze, and my father hurried to calm his powerful guests. I stood frozen in the chaos, my eyes fixed on my sister. Serena was ghostly pale, her lips trembling, but unable to utter a sound. I knew she understood exactly what had happened, and for the first time I saw pure terror in her eyes. The fear of being exposed. I clenched my fists, my heart pounding as I overheard my mother whisper, her voice filled more with worry for appearances than for Jack. "Don't let the media dig into this." I realized then, in a place where reputation meant more than family, people would do anything to protect their glittering facade. As the paramedics wheeled Jack away, Serena couldn't take her eyes off me. Amid this sea of people and flashing lights, it was just the 2 of us, sister to sister, facing a brutal truth. I had just saved myself from a cruel trap, while Serena was devoured by her own fuming. But I didn't know this was only the beginning of a new hell where every finger would soon be pointed at me, the little sister who had destroyed the perfect family's happiness. The days that followed were like a never-ending nightmare. News of the Whitaker wedding scandal covered every local newspaper, quickly spreading across social media. Someone had filmed Jack's collapse on the dance floor. Images of Serena kneeling in tears. My mother frantically calling for help. All became gossip fodder in every cafe and every boardroom my father frequented. But the most painful thing was realizing that with just a single click, my entire family was willing to make me the scapegoat to protect the family name. Less than a day after the wedding, I received the first call from my father. He didn't ask how I was feeling, just coldly cut off every explanation. "Ava, you've ruined everything. It's best you don't contact the family until this blows over." My mother sent me a long email. Not a single word of concern. Only instructions to keep completely silent with the press, not to accept any interviews. "Serena is in crisis. Please, don't make her suffer more." At the bottom, my mother reminded me to transfer all my bank accounts into her name for safety, as if I was a ticking time bomb that could expose all their secrets. Miles, my boyfriend, was summoned to the police station for questioning just because he was the only outsider by my side during the chaos. Could see the exhaustion in his eyes. Felt the sting of baseless rumors that followed us both. My art studio, my only source of comfort, wasn't spared from the wave of slander either. Commercial contracts were cancelled one after another. Old clients quietly disappeared. Online, people who once admired me began to post vicious comments. "A senator's daughter with that kind of ethics. Family records deserve to be punished." Some even photoshopped me into fake news stories. No one cared to hear my side of anything. I wrestled through sleepless nights staring at overdue rent notices and the studio closure warning. Friends drifted away. People who once proudly showed off photos with me on Instagram suddenly wiped all traces of our connection. My phone never stopped ringing, mostly unfamiliar numbers, reporters, or threatening, mocking messages. There were times I felt so hopeless I couldn't bring myself to leave the house. I'd curl up on my worn-out sofa listening to the rain tapping on the window, wondering, was I really the one at fault? Should I have just stayed silent, remained a shadow, played the background for Serena? All for the sake of a family that only looked normal in the eyes of outsiders. Memories of childhood, of being manipulated and sabotaged by Serena, of my mother ignoring my tears to praise my sister, all came flooding back like needles stabbing my pride. I started to question myself. Did I deserve this just because I wasn't perfect? Because I couldn't hide my pain as skillfully as they did? In my weakest moments, I thought about running away from Savannah, leaving everything behind, vanishing as if I had never existed. But just as my trembling hand reached for the old suitcase, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Puffy eyes, a vacant face, but lips pressed together in stubborn defiance. It was right then that memories of all the injustices I'd swallowed, the sleepless nights after being sabotaged. Every time Serena looked me dead in the eye and said coldly, "I'll always beat you, Iva." All of it surged into a tidal wave in my life. I burst into tears, not holding back anymore, letting the tears flow and release all the pain I'd pent up for years. But in the midst of that flood, I heard a small but steady voice in my head. If I don't stand up now, I'll live my whole life in fear and in someone else's shadow. I wiped my tears and stood up, knowing what I had to do next. I didn't know what the road ahead would look like or if anyone would believe me, but I understood. Only by taking control of my own fate could I breathe freely, even if I had to walk alone through the cold night. And that was the beginning of a different Ava. The one who would never stay silent in the face of injustice again. Who would no longer be the victim of a toxic family, even if it meant facing a world that had turned its back on me. I thought I had fallen as low as a person could go. But it turned out that right there in that darkness I found hope from the most unexpected place. That night, when I was nearly collapsed over my old desk, an email notification popped up. Not spam, not another stream of mockery, but a brief subject line. "You deserve to know the truth." My heart pounded, hands shaking, as I opened it. In her email, she explained she'd accidentally discovered internal security footage of Serena secretly slipping something into my glass, then acting affectionate while urging me to drink. Rebecca was afraid of retaliation, so she'd hidden the footage, but after seeing me destroyed by my own family and the media, she decided to stand up for the truth. I sat in silence for a long time, tears streaming down my face, not from shame or helplessness but from something else entirely. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel completely alone. I immediately forwarded the video to Miles. Even though he was also suffering under public scrutiny, he still chose to stay by my side. "You're not the one at fault, Ava. We're going to bring the truth into the light." We decided to contact a lawyer and at the same time tried to reach out to Jack once he regained consciousness in the hospital. Even though Serena and my mother did everything they could to block us. After countless texts and calls that went unanswered, Miles used his industry connections to arrange a secret meeting. Jack was there, pale with dark circles under his eyes from medication and sleepless nights. But for the first time he looked at me with honesty. I silently handed him the video, saying nothing. When he finished watching, Jack buried his head on the table, his hand gripping the chair, shaking uncontrollably. It was a long time before he finally looked up, eyes red and stripped of all coldness. "Ava, I'm sorry. I knew Serena wasn't a good person, but I never thought it would go this far. She hasn't just hurt you. Serena has ruined my life too. Used my family's business secrets to blackmail me into marrying her, threatening that if I refused she'd expose everything and my parents would lose it all." Jack explained that throughout his relationship with Serena, he was constantly controlled and suffocated until he was no longer himself. All his close friendships were driven away by her. Many times Jack had considered calling off the wedding, but then Serena's mother and my own would resort to every trick, even threatening to reveal information that could destroy the Ramsey family's reputation and legacy. "I know you once had feelings for me, Ava, and I genuinely cared about you too. But seeing you treated so unfairly while no one spoke up, it made me feel weak and cowardly. This time I want to change that. The alliance between me, Jack, victim. Turned out. There had been housekeepers, old friends, even distant relatives who had been silenced or forced to leave Savannah just to keep the perfect family facade intact. The meetings between me, Jack, and Miles often happened in secret. Sometimes just hurried messages exchanged in a parking garage or an out-of-the-way cafe. But every time we collected another piece of evidence, I felt a part of myself come back to life. I was no longer the small hidden Ava behind the stage curtains. I felt stronger with purpose, knowing exactly what I needed to protect. My old studio was closed, so I shifted to smaller community art projects, receiving support from people who, like me, had suffered at the hands of model families, hiding deep toxicity. The more voices that spoke out, the more I realized I wasn't alone in this fight. And perhaps the truth really was the only weapon strong enough to set us all free. Once again, I told myself, if my own family can be this ruthless, then I must love and protect myself before expecting it from anyone else. And that's when I knew even if I had to face a storm of revenge from Serena and my mother, I would never run again. For the first time in my life, I was ready to fight not just for justice for myself, but for everyone who'd ever silently endured what I had. Maybe I was naive to think that having the truth on my side would make things easier. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the city grew thick with tension. Every heartbeat felt like another phone call, another threat, another distorted headline appearing in every major and minor paper. Serena. My mother didn't sit quietly once they discovered that Jack, Miles, and I were investigating and had gathered enough evidence to expose all they had hidden. They fought back like cornered beasts, and their weapons, as always, were power, money, and the media. Suddenly, I became the target of a professional smear campaign. They hired their friendly journalists to push out a wave of articles with cold-blooded headlines. Mentally unstable young artist invents blackmail story against powerful family, or senator's jealous sister sabotages everything. My photos from Facebook were edited, cropped, even photoshopped. Some people pretended to be old friend and shared completely fabricated stories about me, trying to paint me as unstable in the public eye. Under every article there were hundreds of hateful comments, vicious words stabbing into my heart. A girl like that should just disappear from Savannah. There's no smoke without fire. She must have done something shady. I knew it was my mother and Serena pulling the strings behind the scenes. Serena, who wept and even pretended to attempt suicide when I texted to confront her with the truth. One late evening, Serena suddenly showed up at the door of my old studio. Her eyes swollen red, a thin coat wrapped around her as if she had just escaped a nightmare. She knocked frantically, begging to talk, then broke down crying. In the freezing room. I'm begging you. Don't make me lose everything. I just wanted to protect what I've worked for my whole life. For a brief moment, I glanced the girl I once loved in her. Vulnerable, frightened Serena, not the manipulative tormentor who haunted my childhood. But then Serena slipped right back into her old ways. She began to threaten me, bringing up our father, debts, the family's reputation, even using our mother's illness as a shield. If you go public, this whole family will end up in jail. Dad will kill himself from shame. Mom's heart will give out and she'll die. I listened in silence, feeling every word like a knife, desperately trying to sever the last thread connecting us as cisbore. Maybe I would have softened, shrunk away in fear, believed I was to blame for the world's misery just for daring to speak. But now I saw it for what it was. Just another kind of manipulation. Another act to keep me trapped in their toxic cycle with no way out. Miles stayed by my side through the endless white nights, reminding me, you don't owe anyone anything except yourself. If you let go this time, you'll lose yourself forever. Jack, despite being hunted by reporters and his own family, kept showing up at our secret meetings, making it clear he was ready to testify for me in court. Together we compiled all the evidence, videos, emails, threatening messages, and brought forward other victims who'd been manipulated by Serena and my mother. The media storm reached its climax when my father called me for the first time in weeks. No longer the calm, respected man I once admired. He was just a politician. Now terrified of losing his seat, his voice shaking but words as cold as ice. I went numb. Even the one person I'd always believed would protect me had turned away, choosing ambition over justice. I understood then that I was truly alone against my entire family. But this time I wasn't afraid anymore. Looking in the mirror, I saw a different Ava. Stronger, more resilient, with nothing left to lose. No one had the right to manipulate me ever again, not even those I'd loved most. And that was the moment I decided it was time to speak out. I never imagined I'd have to stand in front of cameras, face dozens of reporters and journalists, and all those faces that used to look at me with nothing but pity. But I knew only the truth exposed to the world could end this toxic cycle. Not just for me, but for everyone who had ever been silenced in a picture-perfect family. I invited everyone to a large riverside cafe, the place where I'd held my first photo exhibit, where I'd first dared to dream of a free life. In my hands was a hard drive holding all the video clips, Jack's recordings, Rebecca's emails, the financial documents Jack had secretly taken from the Ramsey family safe, and all the threatening messages from my mother and Serena. No one could deny the truth anymore. When the camera started rolling, I looked straight into the lens, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might not be able to speak. But I found my voice low but unwavering. My name is Ava Whitaker. I am the youngest daughter of the Whitaker family, once celebrated as Savannah's model family. But behind all the glamorous parties, the perfect photos, and the inspiring speeches lies a world of control, manipulation, and emotional abuse that I and so many others have had to endure just to protect the family name. I played the hotel's security footage, letting everyone see Serena slip something into my glass, watch as she coaxed me to drink with her fake affection. Next came the audio recordings. My mother ordering business partners to cut off my contracts, emails, orchestrating smear campaigns in the media, financial documents tracing funds to bribed reporters and paid off witnesses. Jack stood beside me, his eyes red but blazing with resolve, stepping forward to confirm everything. My name is Jack Ramsey. Serena Whitaker didn't just control me. Turned lives, including Ava's, to hold on to her family's power. I am ready to take legal responsibility, and I apologize to Ava and everyone else who has suffered at their hand. The press conference exploded. Dozens of questions were hurled at us, and newsrooms rushed to request interviews. Other victims, former friends, hotel staff, even housekeepers who had been unfairly dismissed, started to speak out, sending messages of thanks for voicing the pain they'd hidden for so long. The tide turned on social media. Instead of insults and accusations, there were words of encouragement, stories of surviving family abuse, and support for anyone ever blamed for daring to be different. Thank you, Ava. Because of you, I finally had the courage to tell my own story. Don't be afraid. You're not alone. I hope you find peace and get to be your true self. As the truth flooded out, the media began investigating Serena and my mother. Prestigious social organizations across Savannah cut their names from membership lists. My father's reputation was left in ruins. He was forced to publicly withdraw from politics to protect the family, though everyone knew it was to avoid an even bigger scandal. Jenna and my mother faced lawsuits, the threat of losing everything, while I received new offers to collaborate with organizations that help victims of emotional abuse. I had always imagined I would feel relief watching those who hurt me finally pay the price. But what I actually felt was a quiet peace, not triumph, not gloating. When Serena sent me long, tearful messages begging forgiveness, pleading for just one more chance to start over, I replied simply, "You are my blood, but no one has the right to destroy my life out of fear of being overshadowed." That was the first time I truly drew a boundary for myself and stood firm. My art studio reopened, becoming a haven for people who'd been hurt in respectable families. The photos I took became more than art. They were proof of one simple thing. Everyone deserves to be seen, to be heard, even just once in their lives. And I knew my journey to real freedom for me and for everyone who's ever been suffocated by toxic family tie. A year passed since the day I chose to speak out, and everything had changed more than I'd ever dreamed. I was no longer the small Ava hiding behind a darkroom door. No longer felt I had to bow to anyone just because of blood. My studio had become a true community space. Each exhibition a reunion for those who had once been silenced or crushed by family, reputation, or rigid tradition. Together we shared our stories through portraits, raw emotions and tears mingled with laughter. Because at last each of us could see ourselves in that gentle light. No one could ever take away. Miles was always by my side, steady and patient. As the day we first met, he proposed to me during a packed art exhibition in the midst of thunderous applause and the teary joyful eyes of our little community. There were no more whisks about my background, no more scrutinizing looks about my family. Just me, him, and a shared faith in the free future we were building together. Jack also chose to leave Savannah, sending me a long letter full of gratitude and regret. Thank you, Iva, for freeing both me and yourself. I hope you'll always live as your true self. Never let the past chain your steps again. For Serena, perhaps after so many wounds, she finally started seeking therapy. One day, I found a bouquet of white flowers left at the studio door with a brief note. You dared to do what I never had the courage for. Maybe one day I'll understand what freedom really means. I didn't reply, nor did I hold any hatred. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about opening your heart to someone else, but about closing old debts within yourself so you can gently move forward. I know. Now I no longer need anyone's validation. I don't live for my parents' approval, am not bound by family standards, and am no longer afraid that I might wake up alone tomorrow. Because to live authentically, to believe in the value of freedom and kindness. The most beautiful part is that I am not alone on this journey. Every day I receive messages and emails from strangers sharing their stories about the times they dared to leave the shadows, to speak up after years of suffering. We embrace each other in the wide heart of the city, realizing that sometimes the bravest thing of all is simply to choose yourself even if the world turns its back on you. The day I stood on stage at my first major conference, not as the senator's daughter, not as the unnecessary bridesmaid, but as Eva, a person living truthfully. I looked out over hundreds of unfamiliar faces and felt a strange warmth. I said, don't let anyone, not even family, define your worth. You are not invisible. You are not alone. If you are brave enough to move through the pain, freedom is waiting on the other side. If you've ever felt suffocated, blamed, or unseen, speak up. Share your story, because maybe someone else is waiting to be saved by your experience. Close that chapter without regret, without resentment. I learned that happiness isn't about having a perfect family, but about knowing your boundaries, letting go of what isn't yours, and living with sincerity and courage. And I know in a world where kindness is sometimes mistaken for weakness, only self-love, forgiveness, and faith in the truth can make us truly free. If you, the one reading or listening to this story, have ever been in your own home, remember you deserve to be seen, to be loved, and to be free. You are not alone. Dare to leave and you will find